This episode is brought to you by Monkey Nutrition. You talked about educating America, because let's be honest, you have to get the Americans on board or there is no company in the long run. It's probably true about everything these days. How has it been educating Americans in the art of kickboxing? Obviously, Dana spent the last 20 years introducing them to MMA. I would argue that you can't explain MMA in 3 minutes because it's very complicated. So in a way, maybe your job is a little simpler, but there was a history of kickboxing in America, I think like in the 70s and 80s, and then it kind of died out again. Obviously, Thai boxing was big in Europe and in Asia, but it never seemed to get there in America. How do you do it? And is this difficult? Is this like the World Cup, trying to teach America about football?
Well, if you pick the World Cup as an example, right? 25 million Americans watched one of the games last week when America played.
Oh, is that how it
biggest
was?
Number ever recorded. It took them 25 years to get there. So you can't change user behavior overnight. You need a careful plan. You need a lot of time. You need a lot of exposure to the product. And, as we said before, you need a moment of luck at some point, Bonner, Griffin, whatever it is that you have. But, when we looked at the different demographic and the knowledge level of the audiences, obviously, if you go to Japan, whichever the martial art is, you have a very surreal event where 10,000 people sit in complete silence at the edge of the seat, and when you see in an MMA matchup, you see the grip changing on the wrist of the fighter. They're going for a kimura, for a sweep, and probably 90% of the audience knows exactly what's going on, and they go in even more silent and shift just to make sure that they don't miss the action. Okay, that level of knowledge is unique to that market. You go to America and we talk about kickboxing, a lot of people, the young guys, have never watched it before.
Interesting.
Because even K1 wasn't really done in America. They've done some events. It was like more marketing for the Japanese events.
Yeah, they did one event in Vegas before
they
shut
did
down?
some, and but they were not frequent enough to create a behavior. But then you see some of the people that have watched kickboxing, they might have seen WCL, where it was like a mix of full contact rules and point karate rules, and there was no cage, no ring. It was different. And the season was only on, I think, for a couple of years. That was Chuck Norris promotion, which I loved because, that it's most similar to what I used to do when I was a young guy with point karate, and I loved it. But the older guys, the guy my age, probably remember, Don Oshino Wilson and Bill Wallace, and those old guys with the shiny pants, the mullet, and some mustache. They look more like porn stars than they look like fighters. They were great, and I remember on my home, I was living in Italy, and I had on my wall when I was a teenager, a poster of Rob Kaman and Don Wilson and Samantha Fox and a Lamborghini, whatever it was at the time, a Countach. And it's part of my history. So, but, the young guys don't know that even existed, and the movie, The Kickboxer, was a movie in the 80s. I heard they're doing a remake, so we're really happy. Right. So education of that audience comes from exposure to the product. And our job as promoters is to get the product on the best possible channel. We are on Spike TV, prime time, and that's great. Is to have collateral programming, interviews pre-fights, the countdown shows that we make, but also to have a guy like Duke Rufus, who's our, technical commentator. Duke has been around in the industry. He's the trainer of Anthony Pettis.
Anthony Pettis, the champion right now in the UFC at 155. He has a school up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Fantastic, and he's doing a fantastic job for us. His credibility as the guy who's been there, as the guy who is there, is amazing. I speak to him every time we do events, and he amazes me the depth of knowledge. He knows the name of every trainer in Thailand and every training camp back 15 years.
Yeah, he has real legitimacy. He knows the Thai names of the fighters.
Yeah, I can probably spell it too.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. And he's got MMA appeal because he's got fighters in the UFC, which is an interesting crossover for you.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the legitimacy factor, and we measure fights. We measure fans' reaction to everything that we do, from the fights that we make and the commentators we have, the glory girls, everything that we do, we measure, and Duke comes out, as the guy that checks every boxes. Every fan, whether they're casual fans or hardcore fans, they find his comments so intriguing because he's got plenty of anecdotes. It explains why a low kick scores a point, and the different rules that we have. So more exposure to that rich quality of content will eventually get there. And let's face it, you need to have knowledge of jiu-jitsu or wrestling or some sort of ground game, sambo, to really appreciate fully the intricacies and the chess game that MMA is. With kickboxing, we have punches, we have knees, and we have kicks. It's fast and furious. You have jump kicks and flying knees and reverse kicks and all the stuff that you have seen in other martial arts, but you take away all the difficult stuff to understand. There is no clinching.
Yeah.
There is no ground game, and it's fast and furious. So it really doesn't take more than 3 minutes to decide whether you're going to watch the rest of the fight or not.
This week on London Real, we have astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I wake up every morning astonished that an astrophysicist can have 1.7 million Twitter followers.